The visit of Pope Francis to the Philippines has been recorded as one of the biggest papal events in the history of the Catholic Church. Now, what is the impact to our lives and our country? And joining us tonight on NewsLife is Father Francis Lucas, the Executive Director of the Catholic Media Network. Good evening, Father, and welcome to NewsLife.
Good evening, Bert, Robert, and all our viewers this evening.
Now, Father, to be honest with you, I too miss the Pope, along with the millions of people who gathered when he arrived. Now, how do you think this affected us as Filipinos?
It's a very strong effect that a lot of people that I interviewed and a lot of friends kept on texting me even the whole day today. My smartphone almost got clogged because of the so many texts that I received. They cannot explain what happened to them, but they could not speak. They wanted to cry, and actually they cried. And they said that they saw Christ in the Pope, and they want to change their lives.
Now, Father, some would say it was a miracle. Some say it was something very spiritual. But as a priest, what do you think did we actually all feel with the presence of Pope Francis?
Pope Francis touched our hearts. So actually it was Christ touching our heart through the Pope, who was so kind, so gentle, but he talks straight. He talks straight, and he tells us what we should be as Christians.
Now, what should be our takeaway from this? What should we learn as people, and also for those in government, in terms of the Pope's message saying that service to God, the people, and especially the poor, and also to instill integrity and honesty?
What he keeps on telling us is to be inclusive. That's number one, and to have and to feel the attitude of a Catholic or a Christian in loving others, going out and reaching out to others. So this is part of the inclusivity that he asks from us, because he says that the Filipino culture has been shaped by a deep faith. And in so doing, we have to protect this, we have to preserve this, we have to protect it from ideological colonization, which alienates our own faith and destroys our own culture. Even if we received our faith from the Spaniards, but actually it's the Mexicans, through the Mexicans. We have a different faith than the faith of Europe. Especially today, we will be the new missionaries in Spain, because somehow in Europe, there is what we term a winter of faith. People don't believe in God anymore. They believe in themselves instead of in a God who loves them. So this impact is a change of life. I was so surprised. Some of the texters asked me, Father, what can we do now? I want to go back to Christ, but what should I do? How can we do this together? I did not only receive just one text, and these are influential people. So he touched the lives and the hearts of different types of Filipinos.
But having said that, Father, many were saying, what are they going to do? Do you see people now confused in terms of how do they get back to the path, to their faith, to strengthen it after this big event?
The Pope said, think, feel, and act. I think they have thought about it, they felt about it. Now what is lacking is, how do I act on this? On my belief, on going back to my God, on understanding the meaning of suffering, on understanding being hopeful despite seeming hopelessness in life. So the challenge with us is, how do we become missionaries in the Philippines, in Asia, and in the international scene? Because that is the last challenge that the Pope asks us. Says, you will be the new missionaries for Asia and the world.
Now, Father, in terms of the message of Pope Francis to the youth and youth, what was the most important message, do you think, that he has for our youth today?
For the youth today is to protect their ability and to protect the energy that they have. But he goes back for the youth to be protected through the families. So the youth and the family comes together. And he even says, there are a lot of people who do not have a family, who are lonely, who are hopeless. So they still have to be embraced and included in families that are existent. Because today, the family is in crisis. So when the family is in crisis, it's the children who suffers most.
Now, what do you say to those who are very busy in their cell phones and their tablets and their computers, in the advent of technology? Now, what do you say to them? And what is Pope Francis' message to our, not only the youth, but also even the adults who are most of the time also preoccupied with technology?
What he actually keeps on telling us is to feel with those who are suffering, to feel with the poor and look at the root causes of what debases our humanity of us being persons. Also to have a heart with those who we try to help. Not only as if we're powerful, so we keep on helping left and right, but the heart is not always there. He said you have to stop being like an NGO, just giving welfare, but it does not come from the bosom of your heart, and it does not become spiritual, because you lose it. You still are affected by materialism here. So what he tells us is, relate again with your God. Relate again with other people you're supposed to take care of, to have compassion and mercy.
Now, Father, many say that Pope Francis, who is the leader of the Church, actually practices what he preaches in terms of what he's saying about living a life of simplicity. People really actually see that he is walking the talk. Now, as a priest and part of the religious sector, and also during his Mass at the Manila Cathedral, in his preachings to the priests and the religious sector. Now, how do you now convey this to your own community and also to yourself as a priest in terms of living a life of simplicity?
A priest is formed by his community, and the priest also form his community. It's a symbiotic relationship. So if the priest witnesses to Christ, the community follows him, and he should learn from his community. The priest should not be a know-all. He has to learn from the wisdom of the poor, as Pope says. You have to learn how to cry. That means how to feel the reality of life. You have also to be a beggar, which means do not think that you are always the one helping others, telling others what to do, or even condemning others. No. Your role is to save like Christ. And in so doing, you have to learn from the wisdom of the poor. And that is a mouthful. Because learning from the wisdom of the poor is somebody who has nothing and yet can help somebody else. I'll tell you an incident. This poor man was taking care of 2 babies. They are malnourished. And then he was asked, "What are you doing here? Are you not working?" He says, "I gave my work to the father of this child. I'm taking care of this on his behalf because he has nothing to eat, so I gave him my work for 1 day." See that? You have a burden, and yet you carry the burden of the other, despite the fact that you already have a lot of burden in your life. So that's wisdom of the poor, which the Pope says you cannot even understand the angle or the perspective of the poor. So this is what the Pope is telling us. Let us avoid to become power seekers, to search for privilege, and to gather and stack up wealth that will keep you further from your God and further from your faith.
Now, Father, what can we take away from this now with the 5-day event of Pope Francis here in the Philippines? Now, with the ripple that Pope Francis has started, now how can we continue this and not just leave it within that 5-day event? How do we now continue it? And like what you said a while ago with the 2 babies and the man that he gave 1 day, how can we actually extend it not only 1 day but all throughout our lives?
There are 3 things that I would like to suggest. First is the Pope asked us, pray for me. So that's number 1. If we keep on praying for the Pope every day, we will continuously savor the memory of the impact of his visit in our lives, number 1. Number 2, we have to pray ourselves by becoming beggar to the Lord, asking him to continuously help us in loving, in teaching us how to change For example, how do I relate with my friends? How do I relate with my kasambahay? How do I relate with the children? How do I relate with society? The second. And the third part is we have to continuously act on the reflection that we have about our Pope, about what he said. And through prayer, then you have to go to action. In this way, you don't forget the memory of this miracle that has touched your life.
That's one thing. Hope we don't forget and we continue the things that Pope Francis has told us. And on that note, thank you very much for joining us here tonight on NewsLife. That was Father Francis Lucas from the Executive Director of the Catholic Media Network. Thank you, Father, for joining us.
Welcome.